Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Keane, online fitness coach, nutritionist, and 3-time best-selling author, here to help you by deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness, and mindset. Today's guest is with nutritional therapist Aisling Fox. This is a bit of a different episode because we recorded it live from the Elevate 2023 Health and Wellness Festival. So for those of you who attended it live, a massive thank you for coming. And for those of you that want to attend next year, that's definitely an event I'll go back to. It was one of my favorite events that I've done in recent years. And in today's podcast and next week's podcast with Oisin Mulligan, we do this live. So it's same format, similar layout, except there is a little bit of probably noise from people laughing in the background and things along those lines. So just, on the front end. Also, the introduction that I would normally do with the podcast, I'm going to do now. For those of you who don't know who Aisling is a nutritional therapist and a herbal medicine practitioner who specializes in female hormones and fertility. In 2014, she qualified as a nutritional therapist after completing 3-year diploma in nutritional therapy from the College of Naturopathic Medicine. This includes 1 year of biomedicine studies, 2 years of nutrition studies, and also 200 hours of clinical practice. In 2016 then, she returned to the CNM and completed her diploma in naturopathy, which allowed her to widen her knowledge of Chinese and Ayurveda medicine, Iridology, Bach Flower Therapies, tissue salts, herbal formulas, and Chinese diagnostics, so nail, pulse, face, tongue. And in 2022, she qualified with distinction in herbal medicine after completing her post-grad diploma in CNM. This includes 300 hours of clinical practice, training in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, and extensive studies of phytochemistry and pharmacology. And she's also a member of the NTOI, Nutritional Therapists of Ireland, the professional association supporting qualified nutritional therapists. And she's also the host of the Spinning the Tea with AOK Nutrition podcast. Some of the things we talked about in today's podcast, it's a little bit female skewed. So women's wellness and hormone balancing, although I do offer a little bit of a male perspective on it as well. How living the right way can make you leaner, happier, and hornier. Hornier, I don't know why I said that so weirdly. Without the need to count every calorie that you eat. The major pillars for how to balance hormones, the underrated and overrated supplements, PMS misconceptions, amongst much more topics that we covered in this live podcast. So without further ado, enjoy today's podcast from the Elevate 2023 Festival. A conversation with nutritional therapist Aisling Fox on balancing your hormones and how balancing your hormones can make you leaner, happier, and hornier. Enjoy. Aisling, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. What a gorgeous setting.
We are here in Chambly House with a load of people watching us. This is not too often I have this many eyes looking at us. It's normally ears that are looking at us on the podcast. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to talk all things female hormones, health and wellness in today's podcast. But before we do that, we're going to kind of keep it similar structure to a normal show. I want to talk a little bit about your background, just so people can kind of get to know who you are, anyone that's not familiar with your qualifications, who you work with, who you serve. And then we're going to talk health, wellness, female hormones, the topics that are interesting to everybody. Mm-hmm. But talk to us a little bit about your backstory, what kind of got you interested in the whole area.
Yeah, I guess my story is not as classic as someone else's that just had an interest and went and trained it. My mum was actually a nurse, and she was a children's nurse, she was a midwife. My eldest brother at the time had really, really bad eczema, and she spent the first 12 years of his life trying to find somewhere to fix this, basically. So she did all the tricks of the trade in terms of from like a medical perspective. And he was going into first year school. She was bawling, crying, coming on Temple Street on the way home in the lift. And this woman was like, "Are you okay?" And she was like, "My son is going to school and he's covered in eczema." And this woman gave her herbal remedies. And she gave him to Kieran and his skin cleared up. My mom was like, "What is this witchcraft?" basically. So that was kind of how I was introduced to natural medicine. So by the time I was born, my mum was using natural medicine in the house. So we were brought up with herbs. Homeopathy was so big, even though it's so controversial. And we don't really use that as much anymore in our clinic, but we were brought up using that. I had such a wide understanding of nutrition. So I remember being like a child, my mom being like, "You have to eat your broccoli if you're having pizza." Like, it was like, are we the only kids in Ireland that have to have vegetables with pizza and chips? But she really instilled that kind of nutritional education when we were young. And she has her own clinic called Breath of Life that she set up in 1994. And I guess as I got older, like I worked in the clinic on work experience. I went into sports science and health after school, thinking that I loved the realm of health, when actually it was more like the natural medicine side of things that I love. So sports and health, keyword being sports, like I'm not even in gym gear today at the Wellness Festival. So it was just so from what I wanted to do. So I ended up leaving DCU. I went to C&M, College of Naturopathic Medicine. I trained to be a nutritional therapist, and that was way more up my alley in terms of like natural medicine, food as medicine, looking at like the root of the problem, which we always do in our clinic now. And then from that, then myself and my mum kind of joined forces. Of course, I left and I was like, I want to go out on my own. I want nothing to do with you. Like, she was so established. This was her 20 years in business. And I set up AOK Nutrition separately because I just wanted to be like on my own. So I was nutritionist then for about 7-8 years. And then in 2020, I went back and studied herbal medicine. So we're in Shan Valley today. We actually get our herbs from Shan Valley. I don't know if most people even know that. Like, most of our herbs here most of our herbs are grown in Shan Valley, which is amazing to be able to support an Irish business. Like, and they're so important to us, and obviously we're so important to them. So with herbal medicine, then we just train like in Ayurveda medicine, Chinese medicine, really, really old, like 3,000-year-old ways of healing. But then I'm also like science obsessed. I love looking at bloods. I love biology. I want to know how the body works. And I think that lovely blend of like both types of medicine really is why the clinic works so well. So to answer your question, in our clinic, I guess I've fallen into the realm of like female health and hormones and fertility because I'm so passionate about that, and it's such an area of need, I would say. But really, we see everything in the clinic. We see gut health, we see a lot of skin issues, sleep problems, anxiety, stress. My mum sees a lot of kids, like her being a midwife and children's nurse and now a herbalist. Like, it's just blended so lovely into people who don't want to, go down as much of a medical route with their children. So that's us in a nutshell, I guess. Yeah.
I'm very curious with that. Do you see mostly health-oriented people? Do you see people who are fitness-based and have other issues going on? Because we talked right before we started recording this podcast that one of the misconceptions I regularly see is the difference between health and fitness. There's an overlap for sure, but you can have a really fit female who's stepping on stage at X amount of body fat that's actually very unhealthy because they might not have had a period in a year, 18 months. And there's a point at which health and fitness aren't supportive of one another anymore. Do you get mostly people who have fertility issues or an underlying health issue, or is it fitness people trying to fix an issue that they've self-created themselves through lifestyle and training choices and nutritional choices, or is it a combination of both?
Complete combination of both, absolutely. Like, last week alone, I think I had 6 clients with hypothalamic amenorrhea. 3 of them were athletes.
Can you just explain that for
so hypothalamic amenorrhea is basically loss of cycle due to stress on the body. So basically your brain is under so much stress, it's saying, we are not having a baby. It's the last thing on earth. It can barely get through the day itself. So it basically switches off your menstrual cycle. When I say stress can even be in the form of under eating. It can be over exercising. It can be low body weight. And that's actually quite a misconception as well. Like, I've had many clients who actually are healthy body weight, but they're still under eating, or they're still over exercising, or their job is really busy, or they're nutritional deficient, and they'll lose their period in that sense as well. So very much a combination of both people together. The fitness people are interesting because, like, as if they've done a full circle, and it's really hard because they have to unlearn everything they know. Like, if you are that dedicated, you're not out 3 nights a week, you're not like, you're so on the ball with nutrition, like you're looking after yourself. So I'm doing this because, inverted commas, because it's like they've just gotten too far and they're the fittest they've ever been, they're lifting maybe the heaviest, they're the leanest they've ever been, but like that doesn't always equal health. So it's really difficult for people with hypothalamic amenorrhea because like that's relearning what they thought was right,
With stress as well, I want to unpack, and then I'm going to pull back to the original question in terms of the people you see and the issues that they have. What role does stress play? Because one of the things that's obvious to a lot of people, and people will probably nod when I say this that are in the room, when people are under eating, sometimes they're not aware of it, but sometimes if you really reflect and go, well, I'm having a salad for breakfast, lunch and dinner, you're under eating. And the same with over-exercising. If you're going to the gym twice a day, or you're running for 10 miles in the morning and working out in the evening, you're overtraining. But sometimes, from my experience, and this is your area of specialty, so I want to pick your brain on it, people under or don't see the role that everyday stress plays in things like HA or hormonal function. Talk to us about that.
So I ask clients, are they stressed? They're going to say no. I just did a talk just there and I asked everyone, are you stressed? If you put up your hand, and I say about 10 people up their hand, and I go, okay, let me just rephrase that. Are you busy? And then everyone puts up their hand, right? So stress and busy, they're the same thing. Like, your adrenaline is kicking in whether you are having a really busy day in work or whether you're being chased by a tiger. It's the same stress response. Your body can't differentiate between that. So I find everyday stressors then let's not even talk about work stress. How much caffeine are you drinking? What's your sleep like? What kind of training are you doing? Like some people, you know, after a really busy day in work are going and doing like a 2-hour CrossFit session. Like, and that might not be the best thing for them at that time. A huge thing I always talk about is blood sugar balancing, like basically being hangry, which you know, if you know, you know. And what that is your body, if not eating enough food, you haven't eaten, you know, in a couple of hours, your blood sugars crash and your body triggers that stress hormone trying to get you to eat something. But people might let that happen 3 or 4 times a day, on top of their 3 coffees a day, on top of their CrossFit workout that day. And we haven't even asked them, how's your job that day? Like, what's going on at home? Like, so stress definitely isn't just, like, we've all been through stressful times in our life, but it's day-to-day things that really impact our hormones long term.
What's something that supports people that not enough people do, particularly when it comes to stress?
What do you mean, what?
So, for example, one of the things that I do in my personal life is separating acute stressors from chronic stressors. So acute stressors, short workouts, cold exposure, heat exposure are all things that massively help my long-term stress. Whereas chronic stress, like, you know, constantly fighting with a loved one or a job where your boss is shouting at you constantly, they're very different types of stressors. But I will generally use acute short bursts of stress to help me deal with chronic stress. And I, for years, didn't know that they were two different things. I just had stress as bad, and not realizing that actually there's some short stress term stressors that can help me with the long term. What's something that people, from your experience, can do? It might be from journaling, it might be something completely different, it might be a herb. What's something that people could do to manage their stress? So people in this room, people listening, who are like, actually, I'm quite busy. I actually think I'm stressed now that you say it like that.
Yeah.
And what is something they could potentially do and incorporate into their life that they're probably not doing?
The best thing I find works with clients, and even myself personally, is I plan my week, especially meals, right? So if you know, I always starve my 3 o'clock on Tuesday and I go home with a headache on Tuesday after work and I always end up getting that takeaway or whatever it is. If you look at your week on, say, Sunday, and short-term stress, maybe it just takes you 2 hours to meal prep for the week, and that might be inconvenient that time. But if that means then the rest of your week is organised, well then that's the, like, you know what I mean, that's going to take some stress off you when you're actually up the walls and you're like, oh, brilliant to have my lunch with me. In terms of balancing that, in terms of supplements, I don't know, like, if you recommend much supplements to people. In terms of herbs, like ashwagandha is a huge one, and it's huge in the fitness industry. Like, the amount of clients come to me now and their personal trainers put them on it, which is good, but like, it is like, you can't take ashwagandha with thyroid medication. Can I
pause you on ashwagandha just because that's one of those? Do you think the source of where it comes from is important? Because I know there's different supplements and brands where the quality is considerably higher. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, oh my God, definitely. So like, I buy from Shambali, we buy from herbalists. So I'm a herbalist. I don't buy from just random shops. So it's kind of something that we don't have that challenge, because we have a herbal medicine clinic, people buy from us. But absolutely, it's the same way. Like, you can buy organic tomatoes and non-organic tomatoes. How are they grown? What's put on them? And the quality of the food, it's night and day sometimes in terms of what's put in them. So if you're taking a medicinal herb that's meant to be for your health and it's not good quality, of course it's going to be a plain impact in it. Absolutely. And herbal medicine is really powerful. Like, as much as we want it to be more widely known and people use it, I think, like, after me training to be a herbalist, I'm like, oh my God, there actually should be a lot of restriction on it. Like, that the ashwagandha is amazing, but if you're on thyroid medication, you can stop your medication from working. So it's a brilliant herb for stress and adrenal support. Actually, it's called an adaptogenic herb. So adaptogens give you energy when you need to have energy, and then they help you relax when you need to relax. So it's just amazing how some of these herbs work, but they should definitely be used, like, with caution.
I had she's here actually at Elevate, Orla O'Flaherty. She's speaking tomorrow. She's been on the podcast as well. She's one of my best friends, but she's always giving out about milk thistle, that you can get milk thistle, a liver detoxifier, and people sometimes, I think, I'm not mistaken, the contraceptive pill can stop working from taking milk thistle, and there's a few people in the room whose faces just dropped. But it's huge in the I see, and I've such an issue, and I always talk about, is skin Acumax. Now, I'm probably going to get, like, absolutely slammed with this. I don't even care. It's really popular. You go in and get your facial, and then, like, a skincare specialist, like, oh, you've acne, take this Acumax. And the little ingredient in Acumax is a thing called DIM, right? So DIM, we would use it quite a lot for PCOS. It's great for lowering excess hormones. So it lowers excess testosterone, it lowers excess estrogen. But let's talk about your pill for a second. That is synthetic estrogen. I would never in a million years give, like, we would use DIM as a standalone supplement, but you shouldn't be taking Acumax if you're on birth control, for example, or hypothalamic amenorrhea. That's another one. Like,
that your estrogen is low in that case anyway. And I've had clients who put on this supplement for skin. Now their skin is probably bad because their hormones are all over the place and they're just making their issues worse. So things like that, there should definitely be more restriction on things. Like there's some really powerful nutrients that shouldn't just be in shops. And yeah, milk thistle, exactly.
And they are. Like DIM is it's weird. That's a very popular bodybuilding supplement as well.
For fat loss.
For fat loss, for just managing estrogen particularly. And people are unaware. People don't know about milk thistle. They don't know about DIM, particularly the contraceptive pill. And I think that affects like a lot of people.
And the funny thing is, I will only give DIM with milk thistle. So I'm really strict on that. So I'm always like, I always say DIM is like the bus that collects your hormones, right? But we have to make sure that bus goes down the right road. And that's milk thistle directing down the right path. So imagine you're on Skin Acumax or DIM and you also have really bad digestive issues, like you're constipated. What's going to happen is that bus is going around and around about the whole time and you're just going to make your hormonal issues worse. So it's really important that detoxification is there. So when like we sell DIM, but I'll only like ever give it milk thistle. And on my website, do not buy if you're on any medication, anything, like we will not give it. So very important.
This is such a Pandora's box of a question, and I apologise in advance for asking it, because when I'm asking a hormonal question, it's the same as someone's like, how do I get fitter? I'm like, okay.
How long do we have?
How long do we have? What's something about hormones that more people should know about? Or if you want to take this from a personal standpoint, what's something that you know now as a specialist and someone who helps countless people, hundreds, thousands of people between online, offline, in clinic, that people don't know about hormones, or something that you didn't know that you know now that would benefit people being aware of?
So I just did a talk on this, and it's basically how amazing our hormone progesterone is as women. So progesterone kicks in the second half of your cycle. And not only will progesterone help you with PMS and sore boobs and heavy periods, like it's a natural painkiller, it makes your periods lighter, it makes you feel calm. But for fertility, and when you decide, okay, I actually want to try to get pregnant now, progesterone also maintains pregnancy for the first 12 weeks. And that's your body's progesterone. And after 12 weeks of pregnancy, the placenta kicks in and your body doesn't have to do that work anymore. So the issue with this is, if I see someone, or say you're a female and you've had years and years of hormonal issues, like, you know, irregular cycles or really heavy periods or PMS, and then all of a sudden you have fertility issues, thinking that these are two different things when the common denominator is our progesterone. So if women understood this, and it frustrates me because I'm like, it's such an important nugget of information, that imagine how much less PMS we would have, how much less miscarriages you would even have. Like really early miscarriages are, a lot of the time, are linked with progesterone deficiency. Like women are prescribed progesterone if they've had a miscarriage in pregnancy, previous pregnancy, and if they bleed in pregnancy the second time, they'll actually be given progesterone to take. It's so important. And going back and kind of looping back, we just spoke about, stress depletes progesterone levels. So that would even, I think, make people even more aware of, geez, I actually am busy. Maybe I should plan my meals this week. Like if you knew the impact of stress on the body, and as women, that's one of definitely the main things.
What else depletes progesterone?
So progesterone can be low from stress. Progesterone can also be low because estrogen is too high. So they're meant to be in kind of balance-ish with each other. So you might be cool as a cucumber, like, you know, absolutely fine. But if you have excess estrogen, and estrogen can come from poor detoxification. So if you have digestive issues, especially constipation, if your diet's not great, like, again, controversy, I'm always like cautious saying this, but like cow's milk can be linked with excess estrogen. Depends on the person, not for everyone. I was calling them snotty kids. If you're someone with like loads of ear, nose, throat, mucus, hay fever, allergies, they're the people I've like, let's look at cow's milk for you, but obviously not for everyone. Lack of fibre, breaking down your estrogen, poor, like again, go back to gut health in terms of actually your gut bacteria. Your microbiome also breaks down estrogen. So, you know, it's looking at that balance of those two hormones basically.
With things like cow's milk, and there's other kind of trigger foods, but it's so context dependent, because some people are perfectly fine with cow's milk and can digest lactose and there's no issue. Other people need a digestive enzyme like lactase, or they should avoid it completely because they have issues with progesterone. How important, and this is, I know the answer, a lot of people in the room know the answer, but I want to hear it from your perspective. How important is your nutrition for keeping those hormones balanced in terms of a pyramid of prioritization? Because I know it's not just food. Stress plays a role, like we said. Training, excessive or under training can play a role in movement and moving your body. Sleep plays a role. How important is nutrition, and where would you put it in terms of the pyramid of prioritization, in terms of what order? Would you have sleep above that? Would you have something else above it? Or is nutrition the foundation on which everything else is built?
I would say nutrition is the foundation, because if we're really getting, like, looking at from the basics, the bottom bricks on your house is your gut health. Because when we talk about gut health, people go to me, oh, sure, my digestion's grand. And they don't realise that actually gut health is digestion. It's also your immune system. So 80% basically of your immune system is your gut health. And while you might think, sure, I haven't had an antibiotic in years, I'm actually grand, you might have recurrent, I don't know, thrush, or you might have skin issues, or you might have recurrent migraines. Like, that is an immune response. Women with really painful periods, that's your immune system not responding. And the other thing that's really important for gut health is, you probably know, your mood. Like, your gut and your brain are so linked together. So if those foundations aren't in line, poor digestion, poor immune system, poor mood, everything else is going to fall down. And the reason why nutrition is so important is that food feeds your gut health, your microbiome. So I always say, like, imagine each different type of gut bacteria feeds on a different type of fruit or veg. So there's one type that love bananas, right? But if you never eat kiwis, sure, they're dying in the corner, they're not being fed properly. And that's why you'll always hear nutritionists talk about, like, you know, eat the rainbow. And it's such a boring answer. I'm always like, oh, I wish we'd something like kind of more like sexy and cool to say. But like, that's literally why, because if you eat a variety of different foods, you're feeding all the different types of gut bacteria. And then that's the basis for everything else.
Is there any foods that people should, I won't say avoid, because I think danger's in the dose and moderation is key, and sustainability over a longer period of time for incorporating your favourite foods. But is there any kind of high red flag foods for people when it comes to hormonal issues that, not to say eliminate forever, but definitely consider? Like, I always think when it comes to fitness, you think of your processed foods, you think of your extra sugar, you think of your alcohol. Like, they're foods and drinks you want to minimize if you're trying to hit a body composition goal, for example. From a hormonal standpoint, is there any of those red flag foods? As I said, not to remove completely, but just be aware that these ones tend to not work very well for any female or male as well, because there's a lot of crossover with nutrition who want to balance out their hormones and kind of get them optimal.
So definitely cow's milk if you're that snotty kid. Soy is controversial. It's a funny one, because you'll read, I've seen people being like, there's no research on soy and soy's come out as fine. But like, I would consider tofu and edamame beans very different to soy milk and soy yogurt, right? And I've seen it. Like, you've had about things working with clients. I'm working with clients 9 years, right? I know soy can impact hormones. I've seen it time and time and time again. So very just cautious again with that. Like, especially if someone's vegan and they're on soy protein, soy yogurts and soy milk. It's coming into your diet every couple of hours, and even just making small changes.
What's the difference, out of curiosity? Because I have a gap in my nutritional knowledge here. What's the difference there between the soy milk and, say, tofu? Is it the way it's processed?
Tofu's fermented, yeah. It's the way it's processed, yeah. So, like, obviously, like, the end product of soy milk would have more preservatives in it. It's the goodness is basically gone from it as well. Not necessarily foods, like you were talking about processed foods, like meat is a big one, but we don't really fall in the same category with meat, because as far as I know, I'm always so cautious saying this as well, our meat in Ireland is generally not full of hormones. But if you were living in the US, like if anyone's ever been there,
different story completely.
I go vegan when we're abroad, absolutely. You'll see big, massive things of chicken, and they're fed hormones. And what it is estrogen. So again, estrogen's going to knock off your progesterone. Estrogen can cause heavy periods, like all those hormonal issues. But really, though, moving away from food, it's your environment is also important. And I don't know if you talk about that as much from a fitness perspective, but this food's called xenoestrogens. And I always say estrogen makes you happy and horny, or estrogen makes your boobs sore and your periods heavy, right? So these estrogens...
Can you repeat that slower? Okay, so... I'm definitely going to reuse that line at some point.
So estrogen can make you happy and horny, because estrogen triggers ovulation, and that makes you feel happy and horny. Or estrogen can make your boobs sore and your periods heavy, right? So we've good estrogens and you've not so good. You've good estrogens and you've bad estrogens. So xenoestrogens are from your environment, right? So plastic is a big one. I'm sure you've heard that before. As women with cosmetics and fragrances, and we love our tan, we love our perfumes, we love our hairsprays, we bombard ourselves with these chemicals, and they come into the body, and our body's like, I'm just going to convert them into estrogen, but again, the bad estrogen. And then let's say on top of that, your digestion's not great and you can't process them properly. So I always say to clients, minimize your toxic load. So I think switching things like natural deodorants, get rid of your fragrances. You can still moisturize, just use like a non-fragrance shower gel or body butter, that kind of thing. You don't need to wear perfume every single day. You have to wear hairspray every day. Get rid of your plastic bottles, get a glass one instead. It's all these little things that you can start doing. Wash your fruit and vegetables as well, like pesticides. So that's a whole other like area that I would go into depth with clients, is xenoestrogens.
Really interesting you say that, because that's massive for men as well. Like I've looked at it more so when it comes to testosterone, and as you kind of get older, I'm in my mid-30s now, and you're very mindful of keeping everything balanced hormonally and you can tell because of, happy and horny, as you said.
Same with lads.
Same with guys. I'm looking at the guys here, the morning erection, that's how you know if your testosterone is good.
Yeah.
Like the morning stiffy, that's literally what, that's how you know things are moving in the right direction. But it's the same with those toxins, minimizing anything from your environment that you can control. And have you seen, and again, it's a little bit of a trickier one because your mum has probably seen this more so than you because of age. Is that something that we need to be way more aware of now? Because I don't remember ever, and it might have been just a gap in me not seeing it 15 years ago when I was in my early 20s. People didn't really talk about the perfumes, the deodorants, the sprays, all of these things impacting hormones in a negative way. It seems to be very much a last 5-10 years. Is that down from your experience? Did your mum speak about that when you were younger, or is that something that is way more a 2023, 2024 problem and a problem of the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think we actually just have way more processed things in our life. Like my mum, when she first started, it was 1994. So you couldn't go up and get a takeaway. And it certainly didn't come in from a Chinese, and it certainly didn't come in a plastic container. You might get like a bag of chips in newspaper. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So like even just the lifestyle ways that have shifted so much over the years. And again, looking even like a picture of your mom in the 90s and stuff like that, like they're glam, the amount of products, like it's such a big market now, even in just the beauty industry, and we're all suckers for that, so we're always buying new products. But like our parents wouldn't have had that, so definitely just by default, I think the way like society has gone, absolutely, definitely. And I think maybe research as well. I think like BPA first came out, it's a safe plastic, BPA free. So BPA was basically like a chemical found in plastic. They're like, oh God, this isn't great, let's take that out. And now you see BPA free. But then BPA free in the last couple of years has also been like, it's actually not great either. Now let's just go for glass. So I think research has always been done on these things as well.
It's very interesting as well. I read, I think it was Nutrition and Dietary, a really boring title book, but some decent studies in there. And it was talking about, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want to misquote this, about female Amazonian tribe and women had no words or language for PMS. No issue with mood swings, no issue with sore boobs, just very, very basic. And the researchers who were coming at it from a modern standpoint were like, okay, there's obviously something in our everyday environment that's impacting this more. And they were trying to determine, was it a cultural thing or was it a physiological thing, that women didn't have those massive swings, whereas some do. Like I've had clients in the past who are like, I am a completely different person a week before my period or a week on my period. Like it's like Jekyll and Hyde. Some of them have used that language. And that's normally when there's a massive hormonal distribution or issue. Again, not my area of specialty. I can do the basic stuff like control for sleep, control for nutrition, remove some of those external stress factors, because a lot of it will look after itself. But when you have something deep underlying, you need to work with you, Aisling, or a specialist, or go to clinic. But it's a really interesting thing to consider about what can you control in your environment that'll actually help you. We've talked about stress, we've talked about nutrition, we've talked about the things that can help with your environment. What role then would you say fitness, training or movement has? And I'm very curious from your perspective, because we come from originally from two different schools of thought. I came from a very fitness background and fell into this area of curiosity. Like my daughter's 8 and I'm trying to educate myself, so I know what happens when her first period comes and what's going on in her body, and if she's struggling, I know where to go, where to look for the information, who to speak to. So I have my own kind of area of interest in it. But I came at it from a very you eat protein, chicken, broccoli.
Get her on CrossFit.
Yeah, 100%. I was like, 100%. That's where I came from, and you came from this side. And so I'm curious, from a hormonal balancing standpoint, what role does movement, and I won't say fitness in general, but movement have in terms of keeping everything balanced?
Absolutely essential. Like it's literally, I think exercise, you know yourself, you exercise, you feel so much better, and it produces serotonin, helps those stress levels come down. And the way I always think about progesterone, imagine you're on a crossroads and left is making progesterone and right is making cortisol, which is stress hormones. So whatever you can do to make yourself go down that right road is really important. But then the type of exercise is quite important. And we're all so different. This is the thing as well, that like, let's say you at an office all day, you don't really have that, strenuous job or you're not that stressed and you thrive on your HIIT workout after work and you love that kind of hour and you feel amazing afterwards, and you could have someone else who's up at the crack of dawn with 3 kids and she's running around all day and she's not eating enough food and she's doing the same workout in that class, that might not be the right thing for her to do that day. She might be better off going for a walk or maybe doing a yoga class or maybe waiting and doing that really intense workout on a Saturday morning when she's had a good night's sleep and proper breakfast. So I think exercise is I think you have to personalize it to yourself. I know for me personally, for years, I used to be like, do really intense workouts because I'd be like, I feel amazing afterwards. But of course you do. You just exercise.
Endorphins.
Yeah, it's the endorphins. You didn't die, so you feel great.
Yeah.
And now I get just as much out of doing a yoga class or doing like maybe a lighter weight, just weight session. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's very subjective to the person, but it's so important. Like we're designed to exercise, absolutely. Like definitely.
With hormone balancing in particular, then what are some of the yellow flags? Because I think anyone with a red flag's obvious. You haven't had a period in a year and a half. Your skin looks like something like when you were 13 years old. There's red flags that people are like, there's clearly something wrong with my hormones. What are some of the yellow flags? The things that people in this room, people listening, might actually have now and are not aware that that's actually, they're on the path or on the road, like you said, towards hormonal imbalance. What are some of the things to watch out for so that they can potentially come back and go onto the right path?
The biggest thing that I find upsetting around hormonal issues with women is we think it's normal. So anyone in this room now, I could be like, do you get sore boobs for your period? Do you find your mood drops? Do you find your energy levels are less? Do you get cramps before you get your period? And I'd be like, yeah. Like I remember being in school and, you know, you'd be like, oh, like she's out, it's, you know, period again every 4 weeks. Like you expect, you know, people go home from school for the day because they have cramps, right? We're like conditioned to believe that's normal, but it's not. You're meant to get your period and be like, oh Jesus, I've got to get her to say that's mad, right? So anyone who's like, oh, 2 weeks now, I'm dying to get my period, like you just sometimes feel like literally like a blimp. You're like obviously, you know, as women are like, yeah. You know,
my other half, I know this.
You just feel for literally, and that could be for 2 weeks. That's from when you ovulate until you get your period. So anyone who feels like that would be a yellow flag. But you know, a lot of women don't do anything about it until they're in work and all of a sudden they put a tampon in 20 minutes ago and now it's after flooding and they've blooded over their jeans, right? Or they miss a period, or they've been trying to get pregnant for a year and nothing's happened, or they're getting a period once every 3 months and then they're like, oh, something's not right. They're the red flags. But really though, if you're struggling with any kind of PMS, hormonal issues in the run up to your cycle, that's a sign something's not right either. We shouldn't wait for that like red flag to go off, and it's something that we just don't realise because everyone has it, so we just think it's normal when actually it's hormonal imbalance. And the way you're talking about the African tribe, like it's sad in Ireland and just in the Western world that the way our environment is, and because it happens to all of us, even with menopause, for example, I'm going off on tangent here, but like I see menopause and your period as two of the most natural things. Same way pregnancy, you get pregnant, you don't think about it. You have absolutely no say in the matter. Your body's going to do what it needs to do, right? The same with your period and the same with menopause, but I feel like those two other things are so influenced more by our environment that things can go wrong. And we think it's normal because it happens to everyone, but actually though, it's your body telling you there's something not right here, if that makes sense.
I love that. One of the things when it comes to body composition and weight loss and fat loss, and this has been one of my biggest pet peeves for years, and people are like, oh, I get an afternoon slump every day at 3. I'm like, you're not supposed to have that. That's not a normal thing. People are like, oh, it's just normal. Everyone gets an afternoon slump at 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. I'm like, no, they don't. That's a sign that there's an issue with your caffeine intake, your food, your sleep. That's feedback that what you're doing isn't right. And from what you said, that's the hormonal equivalent when you're having that terrible PMS or you've been trying to get pregnant for a year and you can't, or you're having these terrible periods. That's feedback that actually it's not normal. You need to address that and you can fix that. When it comes to hormonal imbalance, I always think I come at everything with a kind of a body composition or a performance element. That's my area. It's still the people I serve, and hormones are in there, but it's not my baby, for the lack of a better term. It's yours. I always think underrated things and overrated things, and something that's so heavily underrated, I think, is sleep. It's the foundation for everything when it comes to nutrition, for fitness, for wellness, for energy. And there's lots of overrated things that people do. I literally have a list as long as my arm when it comes to that. But for you, when it comes to things that are underrated for keeping hormones balanced, what comes to mind?
Don't have caffeine and empty stomach in the morning. So important. Like imagine having a really busy day and like, I'm going to have my little hug in the mug, and you have a cup of coffee before you eat anything. You're going to literally spike your cortisol before you don't even know how your day goes that day. So for women, I'm like, have your caffeine with your breakfast if you're going to have caffeine. It's the difference you'll see in that alone, even just reducing caffeine. But I think that in itself, like, just try and have coffee with food.
Is that because of, sorry, before you go on to the next thing, which you can continue on, it's like, is that because of cortisol is already elevated in the morning and then you're further stimulating cortisol more?
Yeah. And what happens well is, as you know, like caffeine is also an appetite suppressant. So I've been like, I'm actually not hungry in the morning. I don't really eat till half 11, 12. They might get up in the morning, had a coffee, done a workout, and they don't eat till 12 because they're not hungry. But I'm like, you're not hungry, because I'm like, have decaf. And the amount of people come back to me like, oh my God, Ash, I'm starved at 9:30, not realising they're actually just switching off their appetite. So it's like as if we're missing those hunger cues. And like what you were saying there about the 3 p.m. slump, I'm like, if your body is tired, do you need to drink some water? Do you actually need to relax because you didn't sleep last night? Do you need food? People go, oh, I'm wrecked, I need a coffee. I'm like, you need calories. Like, I think us growing up in the 90s, we see calories as fat, okay? Calories are energy. So it's like me coming here from Dublin, putting petrol in my car. Like, I'm not going to get very far with no petrol. And that's what you should see food as. So if you haven't eaten that much in the morning, you've had a really busy day, you've already done a workout, no wonder your body's burning out at 3 p.m. You know that, and don't people then have a cup of tea or coffee then to bring them back up again, but it's false energy. Defo caffeine and blood sugar balancing, absolutely. Eat regular meals. The difference you will feel when you don't let your blood sugars crash is, as you know, like night and day, because when blood sugars crash, you're releasing stress as well. And this could happen to people 3 or 4 times in a day. Like, I've done it myself. I'm sure you've, like, at times I work from home one day, and sometimes I'm working away and then my hands get a bit jittery and I'm like, oh my God, it's 4 o'clock, I haven't had lunch yet. And it's because my body is signaling, being like, are you messing? Like, I'm so hungry. Please go eat something. And it's literally like, and I go in then, I'll eat a biscuit making my lunch because I'm just like, I need to get sugar into me quick. I see that all the time with clients, as I'm sure you do as well. So really simple things you can just implement every single, like your habits every day. And sleep, as you mentioned, just so important. Like, it's like the foundation, I would say, in everything as well.
Something that I wish I knew back earlier in life, and I think this applies a lot to what you said there, is that kind of cortisol dump. I used to work as a primary school teacher. That's what I did before I went into fitness and did everything I do now. And anytime we'd have an observation during my NQT or newly qualified teacher year, I wouldn't be able to eat anything until I did the observation because I'd be so nervous. And then you get this cortisol dump, and then you would just eat everyone out of house and home. And that, I can imagine, is so easy to fall into. Particularly for females, you might have a busy work day, or mums, the mums I work with, where they're trying to get the kids out, trying to get them packed for school, and it's just a rush. Like, you think the circus is mad, going to a house with 5 kids, like, and they're explaining their situation to me, and I'm like, okay, we just need to kind of control here. And sometimes then the kids will go off to school and they'll be ravenous then when they get that kind of cortisol dump, and not understanding the role that stress hormone plays can put you at a massive disadvantage when it comes to trying to get your hormones balanced. What about things that are overrated then? Like, as I said, when I think of fitness, there's so many, it's like, this is as long as my arm. Like, I could have a million things on my arm written that are overrated. What's something, and again, my viewpoint from a fitness perspective is supplements.
As I always say, supplements.
Is it a supplement first approach being the thing that's overrated, or the types of supplements, or the quality that we mentioned earlier?
I would say everything together, if that makes sense. Number one, like, I see clients like, oh, I'm on like a B vitamin, and they have 5 coffees a day. So B vitamin is meant to be for like energy and stress and, you know, cool, calm and collected. And I'm like, talk about ignoring the elephant in the room kind of thing. And then also quality. Oh yeah, like, people get fish oils and they're a tenner from their supermarket. And I'm like, fish oils are meant to be anti-inflammatory. So they're meant to literally go in and put out the fire. If you're buying if they're charging even a tenner for them, how much are they making them for? How much, like, they're getting the poorest quality probably fish there is. It's definitely going to be prone or anti-inflammatory. One that I actually see all the time is seed cycling, right? So seed cycling is, you have certain seeds and different types you cycle. I actually can never remember because I don't give it to clients. I think it's pumpkin and sesame. I don't know, pumpkin and sesame the first half, and then I think it's flax and chia the second half. I can't remember. Anyways, it's basically 2 different types of seeds. So one of them is going to help with estrogen, the other one produce progesterone. People are like, oh, like seed cycle, but they like that they're not sleeping properly, their other diet isn't great, like they might put the seeds on their breakfast and not eat again until 6 o'clock in the evening, loads of coffee. It's kind of like people miss the bigger picture. I think as humans we like to blame other things as well and not really take responsibility for things, do you know that way? But yeah, I think supplements are probably one of the main ones and people kind of miss the bigger picture. I'm trying to think, is there anything else?
Just on the supplements, because you mentioned omega-3 and something that I've always told clients, but nearly all supplements, omega-3 and probiotics are the high end of you get what you pay for. If you're buying a cheap omega-3 or a cheap probiotic, you're going to get what you pay for. Whereas things like creatine, glutamine, it doesn't really matter. They're free-form amino acids or they're a combination. Just go with, the cheapest one. It doesn't really matter in terms of the quality or the brand. But omega-3, probiotics, is there any other supplement
that I would
recommend? Make sure, that needs to be a high quality.
Magnesium, because there's different types of magnesium. So if you're taking magnesium for sleep and it's magnesium oxide, it's not going to do anything. Magnesium oxide is kind of more for like maybe muscle recovery and things like that. What else? Vitamin D. So important. Vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So I've seen clients are taking these little chalky capsules of vitamin D and they're not going to absorb it properly. So I only ever give vitamin D in like either like a gel capsule or a spray or a liquid. So, and it's usually like the one I take is in olive oil, for example. So you're going to get the benefits from that. Vitamin C is not too bad. B vitamins are kind of a funny one as well. It depends on you could pick up a B complex and the first ingredient is calcium carbonate. Like it's filler in it. So you gotta get what you pay for. But then there's some really good Irish brands, like Nutritional is a really, really good Irish brand, and we have their B complex. I think it's like €12 for a 60 box of them. Like, so, expensive doesn't always equal better quality in terms of supplements. There's some really good brands that are also really high quality as well.
What about sleep then? Because we've touched on nearly everything else when it comes to hormones, and we could have taken one of those topics and gone a mile deep.
Yeah.
But just given a very overview for people, and they can take what's most beneficial to them. What role does sleep play? Now, I'm the high end of up here with sleep being the priority for nearly everything, because it's a big foundation pillar and a big lever and a big rock for all things, particularly wellness and energy levels. So I'm probably a bit more biased than most as someone who's a chronically poor sleeper and has to do everything from block out blue light before bed, have a routine, take certain supplements. Like, I'm as bad a sleeper as can be if I don't control my controllables. Yeah. And people are, for those of you who like put your head in the pillow and fall asleep, like I hate you already. But because people fall on both sides. When it comes to hormonal balance, how important or unimportant, I don't want to skew your answer, is sleep?
It's not even a question. People know how they feel when they don't sleep. So from even an energy perspective the next day and cravings, obviously your appetite hormones are made in your sleep. We've all had a poor night's sleep and then just been ravenous all day the next day. And I think even when you're haven't slept properly, your stress levels are higher because your ability to cope with stress, you're putting more stress on your body, if that makes sense. Like, if you're tired, the smallest tasks seem absolutely impossible. We see loads of sleep. And what's really interesting, I'd love actually to talk about sleep later on, is in our clinic, Chinese medicine. So like the alternative traditional medicine is amazing for sleep issues. Right, so it's a thing in herbal medicine basically called blood deficiency, and blood deficiency are people who are like mentally overworked. It's not got to do with iron, it's got to do with mental burnout. Basically, you're on the go all the time, which is probably like you. And symptoms are things like poor memory and concentration, sleep, you might have anxiety, low energy, dryness, dry skin, things like that. And we have herbs called blood tonics, and blood tonics, when they re-nourish your system, and they're just amazing. This is kind of a little side note, but for anyone that doesn't sleep, Chinese medicine is just amazing for it. Like, I do people like an hour consultation on sleep and nothing else for clients, and my mum is so into sleep as well. Like, she has that's one of the things she's done for years and years and years with people, and such good results with, because herbs work so well. So if you haven't tried herbs, you need to try herbs.
Yeah, no, I have.
Yeah. You got blends like blood tonics. But
over the last few years, I've got much better with it. But a lot of it is the non-sleep things, the not having caffeine or stimulants too late in the day, not training before bed. Like, I could do a workout at 10 p.m. and then be staring at the ceiling 2 hours later and be like, why am I awake? Not realising I've just spiked cortisol again before sleep. And I didn't understand the half-life of caffeine, that if I drank a cup of coffee at 12 o'clock, at 5:30, half that caffeine's in your system. These are all kind of basic enough things that there's no one thing you do for sleep, I found. As a poor sleeper, people in the room might disagree and people listening might disagree, but I couldn't find one thing. It wasn't the supplement. It was a combination of a lot of small things, and getting out into the sun first thing in the morning and making sure that I wasn't taking those stimulants, and all of that added up. And other people won't have this issue. Like, if you're a good sleeper, you don't have the problem. You don't even need to think about it and you don't need to worry about it. But again, as you said, you could do an hour consultation just on sleep alone.
And it's not even falling asleep. We would also, like, I ask clients waking during the night. So, you know, if you're waking 3 or 4, we would always set as like high cortisol levels. You always wake up thinking about something.
Yeah.
I know I do. And if I wake 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, I can never send that email. Or like, there's something in your head. So then again, reflecting on the day and what could I have done differently. And yeah, definitely.
This is actually interesting just to add this, because some people will get this, some people won't need to. What I found as well, cortisol, something I didn't understand. A lot of things I didn't understand 10 years ago that I understand better now, since I've done more qualifications, certifications, and worked with people. When cortisol is too high, you can wake up in the middle of the night ready to go. That's a big one, where you wake up at 2 or 3 and you're ready to get up, you're ready to go. That's a feedback that your cortisol is way too high, which I didn't understand for a large period. I'd be like, all right, it's 3 a.m, I'll just get up and I'll go work out, or I'll go work. I literally would do that. I would do that, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm like, feck it, I'm awake now, I may as well get up and do something. Like, and then at, to 11 o'clock the next day, you're like,
I'm so tired.
You're falling asleep on the couch, like. Aisling, I just want 1 or 2 more questions just to finish up. You obviously massively serve your community, the AOK Nutrition, the Instagram page, the podcast. What's something that you obviously get so many frequently asked questions, and probably the same ones? I'd say 80% of the questions I get are a combination of 1 or 2 or 3 different questions in different ways. What's something that people don't ask you that you wish they asked you more of?
Ooh, they don't ask me. They wish they asked me more of. I don't know.
So for example, one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, what's the fastest way to lose weight? If I just, like, I literally get that at least 15 times a day in my DM. What's the fastest way to lose weight? In some variation. I have a holiday, I have a festival, whatever. And I will always tell them, the fastest way to...
Calorie deficit.
I normally give them a bit of a smart ass answer. It depends on how good the question was. Well, like, if you move to the moon, you'll lose weight fast. Because your weight is your
Love that.
So that will do it. But I always say, well, if you just flip that to what's the most efficient way to lose weight, because that's a very different mindset shift. You can lose weight very efficiently by controlling for calories, moving more, etc. To lose it the fastest way, you starve yourself and you go and run 10 miles or 20 miles every day. But you're not going to be able to stick to that. You're going to cause a whole host of other issues. But that's the fastest way. But it's not the smartest way. It's not the most effective way. It's not the most efficient way. And I wish something, and now off the back of this podcast, people will start texting me and DMing me saying, what's the most efficient way? And you get the answer. So the job done, success. But what's something that equivalent for you?
Yeah, I suppose it's the phrasing of things. Like, people say to me, I just put on the pill for my skin, my acne. The pill fixed my skin. Or I'm afraid to come off the pill in case my skin flares up again. But I want them to be like, why is it happening? Like, I think people should be questioning things more. Even with birth control, this is a huge one as well. Like, we just are like, made to clients, I'm like, I had irregular cycles and the pill fixed it. And I'm like, no, you had irregular cycles and then you switched off your hormones. Like, in case people don't know. And I feel like most people probably know by now, between your podcast and my podcast and shouting it from the rooftops, that like birth control works by switching off your hormones. So I wish people just question more things. And I think it's also a bit of an Irish kind of old Catholic Ireland, like the doctor's always right. So I've had clients come to me like, the doctor said I didn't need to get my bloods done. They said everything's fine. And now I go back to them and I'm like, ask your doctor for that in writing. I want them to say, Aisling's hormones are fine, even though I haven't done the bloods. I'm like, they don't know that. So it's kind of like challenging people's mindsets almost, and kind of like that, the way they think about things almost. And, it's not always like the quick fixes like you see all the time. Like, how do I fix my heavy periods? And I'm like, how long do you have? Like, it's just, or instead of saying, why is this happening? Why do I have the heavy periods? That makes sense.
Yeah, there's a really good point on that too. I've had doctors on the podcast. The ones that jump to mind straight away are Doctor's Kitchen and the food medic, Dr. Hazel Wallace. She's Irish as well. She's based in London. But talking about the nutritional training that doctors get, she's like, we got 2 to 4 hours of nutritional training over 7 years. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, that's so low. And then you'll go into your doctor. I remember, I don't know if I've told the story on the podcast, when I used to do one-to-one personal training, I had one of my girls who was trying to lose weight. She was going into the doctor for blood sugar issues, and he literally told her, every time your energy levels drop on your blood sugar, just have some white bread and jam. Which is literally, for anyone that doesn't know, is the worst thing you can do. It's just this roller coaster. And I was like, what does your doctor look like? She's like, he's about 7 stone overweight.
Yeah.
I was like, well, fair enough. I was like, look, you don't go to your barber or your hairdresser for advice for your car. I was like, you probably shouldn't go to your doctor for nutritional advice. That's what nutritionists are for. That's what dietitians are for. And it's not to say that they don't. 100% doctors are amazing at certain things and provide an amazing service, but nutritionally, they might not be the best in terms of offering the advice. And if you're not happy with the answer you're getting, you might have to seek an alternative. Like if if I always say, if I get into a car crash, I want Western medicine to sort me. If I have an issue with my gut, I want potentially an alternative route to get to, and not just be given I was given Nexium when I had a stomach ulcer when I was in my 20s, and then my stomach was wrecked for 4 or 5 years after because I was taking that every day. They just said, when my stomach got worse, they said, just take 2. Then that's the response. So like there are things that you might have to take control of your own health.
Defo. I actually feel bad for doctors, and my mum is a nurse. Like, we're so open to medicine, and like we're very much complementary medicine. It's not us versus them, right?
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. But when you go into your doctor, let's say again hormonal issues, and you've a 17-year-old girl there and she's fainting in school and she's having heavy periods, extreme cramping, they're like, okay, I have this birth control, or I have this birth control, or I have this tranexamic acid which stops bleeding, or I have this painkiller Ponston. They don't know anything else. So it's not their fault either. They're so well trained. They're doing that because they want to help people. But it's just this like kind of like not communication between the two of us. And the main two people back to me, and the doctor has said, nutrition, they don't know what they're talking about. Why would nutritionists want bloods? Like, and it's a real, like, a back up against the wall and really like dismissive or kind of slams what I'm doing. And I'm like, I'm respectful of what you're doing. You should respect what I'm doing. Herbs are the same. Try being a herbalist in Ireland. My mum became a herbalist in 1994. And she left her job as a nurse to become a herbalist. People must have thought she was actually mental. I'm like now as an adult, like my dad, she had 4 kids. Do you know what I mean? Could you imagine? My dad was probably like, okay, honey, like go ahead, and set up her clinic. Like, it's more open now. But at the time, probably like, who's this mad witch doctor setting up? And she was so headstrong and she believed in it so much. And I think because she had the medical background, there's so much science in herbs. So I talked to you about like the TCM, the Chinese medicine perspective, but like, when I did it 2 years ago, like we did a whole pharmacology, sure, and all the science, and most drugs are made from herbs. So it's like that resistance. Doctors should be more open to what we're doing. And you said nutrition, it's actually lifestyle medicine what it is. If you go to doctor hypothalamic amenorrhea, like they need to understand the exercise, the calories, nutritional deficiencies, the stress perspective from lifestyle. A pill will never fix that. Like, so it's like, hopefully as time goes on, it'll be more like integrative medicine. But at the moment, it's just hopefully people like that will be questioning more, and it's not the doctor's fault either. They feel like if they don't give you a prescription, what else they can do, and it's just the way they're trained. I was actually told, I went to the doctor last year about my bloods. My thyroid is a little bit high for pregnancy, right? And I said to my doctor, I was like, just out of curiosity, I was kind of in a recon mission, do you know what I mean? And I went in and I was like, just out of curiosity, like, obviously my thyroid's a bit high for pregnancy. And she's like, are you trying to get pregnant? I was like, no, not in bone, but probably like next year. She's like, to be honest, I wouldn't worry about it until you've had 3 miscarriages. And but that's the advice they get.
Yeah, but that's what they're told.
And I was like, sorry, like my jaw was in the ground, and I was so taken aback and so flustered. I didn't even challenge her because I was like, okay. And it was a real white coat syndrome. And I left and I was like, why didn't I say anything? So I understand if people even feel going in, us kind of, pep talking now and go in and say it's not normal, I want this and I want that. But when you're sitting there in front of the doctor and they're saying, you're fine, you don't need blood, you're grand, you're like, okay. Like, it's really hard to challenge that. Like, but hopefully it will change as things go on, and the more we talk about it, I think it will empower people to understand when things aren't normal and to question things as well.
You also have some great doctors who do that approach, and that will integrate it and will recommend alternative routes. When I say alternative, I don't mean necessarily alternative medicine.
Complementary.
Yeah. Alternative to them is what I mean in its most literal sense. And again, it's not a knock on any doctors that are listening or anything along those lines. They do an amazing thing. It's just you might need to take control of your own issues and seek something more complementary. So just before we get completely destroyed on social media for all the doctors coming at us.
We want to work with them.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you can't expect them to know everything. Like, how long have we been training? I'm still learning things now. I'm working with clients 9 years in this specific topic. So you can't, it's not their fault at all. Like, they're so well trained. They're what's it called? Vocation?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely not their fault.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Aisling, as I said, we could have taken so many different topics and gone a mile deep, and maybe at some point we'll do a round 2 and pick a topic and go really deep on it. But for those who are listening, you're doing amazing things with the podcast. As I mentioned, the social media. For anyone that's listening who's not following you and wants to do a deeper dive into your content, where's the best place for people to follow you?
Yes, I'm AOK Nutrition on Instagram, and my podcast is called Spilling the Tea with AOK Nutrition. And kind of like that, I've literally done different topics for different episodes, kind of like little deep dives, half-an-hour episodes, covering real specific things.
Amazing.
So,
and I will link those in the show notes for everyone listening on BrianKeaneFitness.com. They'll also be in the description. Go follow your Instagram page. Go check out the podcast. Podcast people love podcasts, so go check it out for sure. And for all the people listening in the room, a massive thank you. Aisling, so much thank you for your time, for your knowledge, for your information. We'll chat again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Boom.
There you have it, nutritional therapist Aisling Fox on balancing your hormones and how that can make you leaner, happier and hornier, live from the Elevate 2023 Wellness Festival. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast as much as I enjoyed recording it. I went back over and was making notes when I was doing the show notes for my top 3 takeaways, which I'll also be listening back when this podcast goes out. If you enjoyed it as well, please leave a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. That would be amazing. I read as many of them as I can, and the ratings help bump the podcast up so I can get great guests on to come and cover topics that will hopefully support you on your health, wellness and fitness journey. So that's everything from me from today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you all next Monday.